Great, I'm Peter Loge, Emerson 87. Played on the soccer team when we were a terrible club side, so it's nice to see him winning some games. I'm an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University. I'm also the associate director of the program. It's nice to be back among friends. Scott Ratson and I think, were quoted in the same article about responses to COVID. Susan has been on a panel I organized a while ago, but I think I'm on this panel because I wrote Soccer Thinking for Management Success, Lessons for Organizations from the World's Game. And in a week and a half, I'm co-hosting an event about whether and how soccer journalists should cover the human rights issues surrounding the Qatar World Cup. And it's bringing together Grant Wall, who's one of the nation's most respected soccer journalists, with a couple of human rights experts for a frank conversation about, you know, when is the game about more than the game. So thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Lee?
Great, Lee Stacey. It's great to be here. And for those of you from out of the district, welcome to Washington. Hopefully you're enjoying the great weather we're having here. I'm a vice president of global partnerships for Monumental Sports and Entertainment. Monumental is the holding company that owns the Capital One Arena here in Washington, the Washington Mystics, the Washington Wizards, the Washington Capitals, and various other properties, including media and running buildings in the market. We're probably one of the fastest growing regional sports companies in the Americas right now. And we've made a big investment in esports, and we're really pleased, Andrew and I are really pleased to be here today to talk to you a little bit about that.
Yeah, hi, I am Andrew Mcneill. I'm the Senior Director of Esports at Monumental, working with Lee here. So I oversee our esports division at Monumental, which includes our NBA 2K League team, which is part of the NBA's official esports league. Wizards District Gaming, we're the two-time NBA 2K League champions. We have a Caps Gaming NHL esports initiative that falls under the Washington Capitals umbrella. And then we are also building a 15,000 square foot esports facility in downtown Washington, D.C., right next to Capital One Arena, which will be opening beginning of 2023, which we're really excited about.
Thank you, Andrew. So, building bridges through sports and e-gaming. We're going to let Lee Stacey start it off in terms of sports and e-gaming. And then he's going to bring in Andrew, and then we're going to come back to Lee, and then we're going to turn it over to Peter. All right, Lee, do your thing.
Thank you. Little did I know 9 years ago when I joined Monumental Sports that not only would I be dealing in esports and e-gaming, but also dealing with it internationally. We're very fortunate to be in a market like Washington where you have all sorts of international people and international embassies, and obviously the event last night was a great example of that. And we struck up a relationship with the UAE embassy through Etihad Airways a number of years ago. And fortunately for us, the U.S. ambassador for the UAE, Youssef El-Ataba, is a real believer in sports in general and bridging cultures, but he's also a big believer in esports. Because obviously a good percentage of youth in the Middle East, in the UAE specifically, are under the age of 30. And so he felt it was a really good opportunity to bridge the U.S. With the UAE and develop an esports program, which Andrew and I have been working on for the last 3 years. So it's really become a really good passion point for us in being able to work. And we're presently in planning to bring some e-gamers from Abu Dhabi to the U.S. once our facility is built, so that we can have matches and be able to continue to build that bond. My responsibility there, just so you know, is to be able to go out and develop business with blue chip companies, which we have to advertise in our esports programs. We have Procter & Gamble, Pepsi, Rockstar, Giant grocery stores, Alarm.com, and many other blue chip companies that have invested heavily in esports because they believe it's the wave of the future in being able to attract young consumers to their businesses. So, Andrew, I'll let you elaborate a little bit more on our strategy.
Yeah, you know, esports is one of those things that it is more so than maybe any other sport. It's international. It doesn't take much to get involved in esports. You know, I think if I wanted to put together a pickup football game, I'd need, you know, 21 other people in order to do so. But with connectivity across the world being what it is, the prevalence of equipment across the world, it makes it easy to connect with folks. And so we're seeing, you know, the exponential growth of the esports industry in terms of live events, in terms of participation. It's a really easy, the access is really easy to get to, and that will get people playing and then build that pipeline to eventually the professional levels where we're at. And so we've been working with the UAE and other partners to really kind of bring some of these cultures and these conversations together in a way that moves the dialogue.
And believe it or not, Peter, we actually have been having some discussions about how we can incorporate FIFA into our strategy. And one of the things we're doing, I think the group will be interested in, is Andrew and I are working on a concept, given the recent peace accord between Israel and the UAE. We actually have an Israeli basketball player on our team, Denny Avia, and we're actually in discussions with the embassy of Israel and also the UAE on having a FIFA tournament and having Denny come in as a special guest during that tournament. So,
Very cool. See, I think that's very cool. That's very cool. I assume you'll set me up with seats. Is that a safe? Safe? Not to put you on the spot in front of 100 people. I think there are three things going on here that I think are especially interesting. The first is, of course, sports diplomacy in general, right? We're building bridges with professional teams and professional franchises. The State Department has a sports diplomacy office. Most of you know about that. The second piece is professional teams in their communities, clubs working in their communities to develop and strengthen communities. I think a great example of this is at Athletic Club, Athletic Bilbao, in the Basque Country. Ander Caballero is in the back of the room. I'll highlight him several times. Athletic Club does a terrific job in Bilbao of working with schools, sending books to schools, working in the community on literacy, civic engagement, things like that. DC Scores and America Scores, a nonprofit organization here in the US, founded here in Washington, DC, does the same thing. The third part, though, is something that I think is the most interesting that Andrew touched on. And that's the part of sports we don't see on TV, and that's the pickup games. One of the ways people develop and maintain community is through the casual interactions of your regular Wednesday night basketball game. In my case, it's a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning pickup game. The question when you show up isn't, what do you do or who do you work for, which in DC is code for how helpful can you be to me. The question isn't, what did you drive up in? How much do you make? The question is, do you have a white jersey? We need another guy on that team. Hey, can you play back for a little while? And it's these loose connections that keep communities together. A couple of specific examples of this. And one, again, is Ander, who's sitting in the back on his phone, ignoring me because, not that he has to be nice because he's staying at my house, I'm just saying, Ander. He texted and said, hey, I'm going to be in town for a thing. Is there a game I can jump into on Saturday morning? And the answer is, of course. And he's going to show up, and he's going to be on the field. You read stories all the time of folks moving to new towns, places like DC or Boston, which are pretty transient. And you just show up in a game. And now you've got a community. You've got a group of people, right? They can help you find an apartment. They can, introduce you to the best place for pizza, set you up with DC United tickets, or take you to a Caps game or to a Wizards game. There's some anecdotal stories during the early days of the pandemic when the world was shut down of really kind of the psychological devastation done to a number of people because their games were gone. Right? There are people for whom the Saturday morning pickup soccer game or the Tuesday evening basketball game is their social interaction. It's where they see friends. It's where they interact. That's gone. You lose a critical part of your life. You lose a critical part of who you are. You lose a critical part of your community. So for me, a lot of the strength of building bridges is obviously FIFA. It's the esports. It's sports diplomacy. It's the great work the Wizards and others are doing. But a lot of it really is just what happens in a gym on a Tuesday or on a pitch on a Saturday.
And to that point, I'm sure when the pandemic hit, your Saturday soccer game probably went away, right? Yeah,
we stopped there are two games. One of them stopped for over a year, and then finally people said, look, once everybody's vaccinated, can you come back? And this is just great to be back. Because I'm not talking about work, I'm not talking about polling, I'm not poring over, I worked in Democratic politics for 30 years. I wasn't poring over the depressing data that I was reading out of Emerson polling. I was just kicking a ball around, right? And when that came back, it was just this huge I don't know, piece of my life that have been brought back.
And I think that's one of the reasons that gaming really accelerated a lot during the pandemic, because those went away. And so a lot of times people turn to, okay, well, I can't do it in real life, so let me just jump on FIFA and I'll chat with my friend and we'll just play one-on-one, we'll play co-op or something like that. And that's why we saw so much of the growth of the grassroots scene of gaming, which obviously helped build up the professional scene along the way.
Well, actually, that's a great example of, we were talking about COVID in the panel beforehand. During COVID, actually, one of the fortunes that happened with all the misfortunes going on was esports. It was one of the diversions that people had. In fact, I remember sitting in a bar restaurant one day and looked up and ESPN2 was broadcasting an NBA 2K game. Because ESPN at that time, Al, was so thirsty for programming, they actually ran esports on ESPN2. And I think that helped the game tremendously from an interest level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you know, I think for us, for the NBA 2K League, we're about 10 days away from starting our third season when Rudy Gobert tested positive and the NBA and NHL seasons were postponed. And we only delayed our season by 5 weeks before we moved everything completely remote from a broadcast standpoint, from a competition standpoint. And then we started our season and we completed it in full. And there was probably 2 or 3 months there where we were the only sport or team at Monumental that were going. And, you know, for Lee and his team, I was the most popular kid in school for, you know, just, hey, what do you got for me? What can I give this partner? So, yeah.
I think there are a couple of things that these sports teach us, that the esports taught us, that we really also lost during the pandemic, and that's just how to get along. Right? A lot of being a member of a community is navigating scarce resources, assigning roles. Where is the gap? How do I fill the gap? You learn how to manage. You learn how to follow. You learn how to lead. Kids learn this playing sports, whether you're any good or not. You learn how to coach and be coached. You learn how to win and how to lose. Right? A lot of pickup soccer is just a reminder of how to negotiate shared space. And a lot of that was lost during the pandemic, right? We've seen, all of us have experienced this kind of a fraying of our local communities. And a place where we learn that, where that comes back, is with esports and online. And, you know, happily now that we're more or less back, as Scott said, we are in fact in the middle of the pandemic, and some of us will likely get sick as a result of this conversation today. But it's remembering how to be together in a shared space as part of a community. And sports does that in a way that's fun, it's interesting, that you internalize that thinking, oh, I've got to think about my community stuff now. You just kind of do it and become part of who we are.
And that aspect, I think, of esports is still in development, right? So, like, we have the professional scene for a lot of titles that is really well fleshed out and growing. The high school and collegiate and the grassroots scene is still very, very early in development, and that mentorship aspect is I think a piece that's really missing for esports, and something that I know we are trying to work locally to develop and work with partners to do youth esports camps and you know, youth coaching clinics and that sort of thing, because I know, you know, growing up playing basketball, if I acted like a jerk, you know, get on the baseline and run sprints, that sort of thing. There's not that sort of mentorship and coaching aspect at the youth levels of esports currently. And so I think that's where a lot of the toxicity that esports gets a bad name for comes in, because there's not that sort of mentorship and growth.
We have an example of a great example of an advertiser who has embraced esports, and quite frankly was a real shock to me that they did, and that's Leidos, which is a worldwide federal company dealing in federal military space. And one of the benefits, believe it or not, that they find in esports is that it makes them a cool company. So we've actually had clinics at their offices with their employees. They've done recruitment events where when people show up to apply for jobs, we've had our players and game sets set up for them to be able to play. And Leidos is thought this has been just a great opportunity for them, and more companies that you would never think would be in the esports space are getting in there. We still have some challenges with some people. You know, most of the buyers we deal with are in the 40, 50 year age group, and they're having a hard time understanding the value of esports and the advertising around it. But what we say to them is, they'll say to us, well, tell me about this esports. And they'll say, it's coming, right? And I go, no, it's not coming, it's here. So we're finding tremendous acceptance from companies. Questions?
Yes.
Do you, when you're building out your esports teams, as opposed you're building out your esports teams as opposed to your orthodox sports teams, do you utilize any other different brand strategies that you would not use with the traditional sports teams, or you could not use with them?
In terms of partnerships?
In terms of partnerships or even just team expansion?
Well, I would think, I think esports has to be organic. You can't be over commercialized. That's one of the things we've really learned. Andrew's taught us that you've really got to kind of blend into what esports is rather than having esports blend into the advertiser.
Yeah, I mean, the old cliche in esports is authenticity is key. Like if it's coming off as a commercial, it's going to be called out and completely ignored by that community. But in terms of sort of the team side of things, we do try to take very much a traditional sports approach to team building in a lot of ways. Our team for Wizards District Gaming, for instance, they're 18, 19, they're essentially college-age kids that are coming to play professionally, and they're foregoing college for this opportunity. So for a lot of them, it's their first time living away from home. It's their first time being it might be their first job, and we're expecting them to come in and be professional athletes all of a sudden. And I kind of joke a lot of times with some of the Wizards team ops folks where I'm just like, you guys got it easy. You're drafting a kid who was the best player in his college team who knew he was going to play pro ball, and before that he was the best player in his high school team who knew he was going to be a college basketball player. We're drafting a kid who's 18 years old, maybe started playing 2K a couple years ago and got really, really good, really, really fast, and all of a sudden he's here and you're a professional athlete just like Bradley Beal, for instance. It's a lot of pressure to put on someone, and so we go through a lot. We go through, pre-draft interviews with them. We scout film, and we have them interview with mental health performance coaches just so that we can make sure that we're drafting someone who's ready to be a professional athlete, as close as we can get to that in esports right now.
Thank you.
So unfortunately, we see a lot in traditional sports that women's teams fall to the wayside. They don't get as much coverage. What are you guys doing to make sure that there is space for women in esports as you guys are expanding out new teams and as you guys are expanding into other avenues?
Yeah, it's a huge push for us as an organization, for the 2K League in general, and I think it's big across all of esports. I think you're seeing esports leagues that are popping up that are either, sort of women-only leagues, or you're seeing teams that will have female teams in their leagues as well. For us specifically, the 2K League has been doing women in gaming camps every single year to help build that scene. They've funded pro-am teams that play in online tournaments throughout the offseason to try and help them get that exposure to get drafted. There's been a handful of female players who have been drafted in the 2K League over the years. I know for us, we've been working to build out a female gamer program the 2K League does this women in gaming camp that brings in all the top female 2K players from around the country and does like a 3-day camp with team coaches and players and kind of really trains them up over a couple of days. We obviously can't bring in everyone from around the country, so we're really focused on our local area. And so we've been working with the Mystics to really target middle school and high school age female gamers and trying to build out a program to inspire them to participate in esports in either a competitive level or whether that's from a content creation level. I think one of the biggest aspects of getting involved in sports and sticking with it is that parental support. And so for us, we're building out a program to not only inspire girls to pursue this, but also for their parents to educate them on how to support their kids' passion. So that's a program that we're building now. We had a female streamer who streamed 2K Mystics games and NBA 2K on the Wizards District Gaming Twitch channel. I had this co-branded content series with her, and we're building this program up from that.
You talked about the mental health assessment to evaluate whether or not someone is ready to become a gamer at this level. What kind of mental health support or oversight is there to ensure at this young age that they have the right balance in their life and that they don't get consumed sitting still, doing this gaming instead of being out on the pitch competing?
Let me just say one thing before you answer that. So when Andrew came to me in one of the first years, we had an NBA 2K team, and I handled the MedStar Health relationship for our company. And he said, do they have a counselor there, a mental counselor, that we can get in touch with? And I went, a mental counselor? Why do you need that? And we went from there. So
Yeah, and actually, one of the really cool things about our organization is about 3 years ago, our chairman, Ted Leonsis, and the Wizards front office came together to build out this monumental basketball platform and basically took the Wizards, the Mystics, the Go-Go, which is our G League team, and Wizards District Gaming, and created this platform for all 4 of our basketball teams, even though our basketball team is a virtual basketball team, and created this shared services model so that we have access to the same mental health coaches, the same off-court development staff that the Wizards have, that the Mystics have, that the Go-Go have. And so we have a ton of resources from a more traditional athletic standpoint than any other sort of esports team or any other, especially any other NBA 2K League team. So we have, sports psychiatrists on staff that our players have access to, mental health performance coaches, even nutritionists, things like that. Like we treat our esports athletes like they are IRL athletes.
Lee, I guess this is for Lee mostly. I'm just curious, how does esports measure user engagement so that your advertising partners know the demos they'd be reaching and who these people are?
Well, that's a very appropriate and timing question, because Andrew and I have been in discussions for the last couple of weeks about how we do measure that, and Andrew would be able to supply more of an answer to it, but we do subscribe to a third-party company that does measure audience impressions and things like that, because we believe in order to not only sell esports, but also to maximize the value on the P&L, that we really need to show some documentation of readership, not readership, but viewership. So, Andrew, you might want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so as Lee said, we work with third-party services that'll kind of measure the brand impact for our partners from the streams of our games on broadcast, from the social content and video content that we put out. And we also get demographic information from the league itself that helps us kind of identify who our fans are. I think one of the things that we're most excited about moving forward is that we're building this new esports facility, because while we have that data from the league, it's all from people that are watching virtually, and we don't get have touch points with them really, other than putting our content out there, showing our games on broadcast. Having a dedicated facility where we're going to be playing games in person and having fans coming out that we can meet them, shake their hands, and get that data from them, that's going to help us tremendously, especially as we market a lot of our partners locally.
Earlier before, you said that the grassroots aspect of esports is still lacking and needs foundation. So if we play the hypothetical game, let's say, high schools have esports programs, and colleges do too, on par with other athletic programs. How much value and credence would you put into recruiting players who go to colleges to play, NBA 2K, and then use that as their path to professional level? And since it's out of the hands of the NCAA, would you see yourself potentially associating with different organizations like high schools or colleges?
I think we would put a lot of credence in it. Winning tournaments is winning tournaments. Competing is competing. I think right now, because those levels of the pyramid have not been fully established, there's nothing to say that this high school tournament is not as valuable as this other pro-am tournament in terms of like the level of competition and who's performing. So the cream tends to rise to the top. Maybe it's just harder to find right now, but we would absolutely look at a high school tournament, play it at a high level, and identify those players if we think that they can do the job. And yeah, since the NCAA is not involved, I think that makes it easier for us to sort of help support those scenes and help them grow and help showcase them. We wouldn't specifically go out and sponsor a collegiate team or anything like that, or put one together, but we would very much, especially locally, help support that scene so that it can build up, because it would only help us in the long run.
Actually, it's for Andrew, but I appreciate Lee as well as others. As you've heard today, Lee as well as Al Jaffe and others were very supportive in us launching the SportsCom program at Emerson. So we've kind of gone into what people are doing in terms of being successful. As we have a track now in the SportsCom program, with Andrew and others arguing that this is something that could grow into its own major, what would you say we should be teaching in order for a person to be on stage like you are at Emerson College in terms of communication, management, et cetera?
I'm only laughing because getting into esports at a professional level is the windiest road that's in existence, I think, at this time. There has been no, this is now, like, with you guys establishing a major, like, this is now when colleges are starting to establish, like, okay, this is the actual track that you take to get there. Like, I was a journalism student who was an event organizer before I got this job. There's no sort of right path. And when students ask me, like, oh, how do I get this job? I'm just like, I don't know. So I think one of the things that I think people don't quite understand is that, like, every professional job that any sports team would need, that most organizations need, there's a need for that in esports. And so I think being able to develop those skills in college, whether it's you're interested in finance, accounting, partnerships, marketing, whatever, developing those skills, but also getting out there in the gaming and esports scene, whether it's volunteering at events, whether it's competing on your local college team or whatever, just finding a way to get into that esports world and into that bubble and meet people while developing your professional skills on the side. I think that's the best way to do it currently.
Lee, anything you would add to that? Because you've been a big supporter of esports.
No, I think once we build our facility and we have events and people can come in and see practices and we have other events being programmed there, including FIFA events and things like that, not just NBA 2K or Caps Gaming. I think that's going to open up a lot of different ideas, and we would welcome Emerson's involvement and maybe having some interns come in and learning at least for a day and shadowing what's going on in our esports facility. I think that's very, very possible.
I would add, I think that in addition to these skills, something that all of us need to teach is ethics, right? If you study journalism, you have to take a course in journalism ethics. Emerson requires ethics courses. Former President Lee Pelton had a great line about the need to, think historically and in context. The School of Communication is founded in ancient ideals of ethics. I think if we're teaching journalists, if we're teaching communicators, if we're teaching advocates, you're part of a larger community, and you're part of a larger sort of humanity, right? The point of today is building bridges. Do you as a journalist have an obligation to help build those bridges, to explain the social context in which these games are taking place, right? Obviously, with the World Cup in Qatar, there are questions about how migrant workers were treated, LGBTQ rights in the country, or just complete lack thereof. There are questions of who owns teams around the world. There's questions of, golf tournaments. It's a deal in cricket. As a sports journalist, you want to cover the game, right? As a sports guy, I just want to read, like, look, is McKinney healthy and on? What is up with Gio Reyna's hamstring? Can it please just hold tight for another 6 weeks? But I think it's also, journalists have to understand that the sports exist in context. Who gets to participate? Are there young women getting engaged? How do we do that? How are we building bridges? In the US, soccer's pay to play. So you're excluding huge swaths of really interesting, smart, motivated kids who just aren't going to get a shot, right? Fred's son is an outstanding hockey player. He saw, I'm just going to tell on your kid, saw a Caps championship ring, and his response is, I want one of those. How do you make sure, as a journalist, you're covering the dream? And the dream in a context. What happens to a kid who's close but not quite good enough, or who gets a career-ending injury too early? What about what stadia do in communities, the good and the bad? So I would suggest there has to be an understanding of more than just the tricks and the leads and the techniques. It's an understanding that you're a part of a broader community and you have a responsibility at some level to that broader community.
Okay, Peter, I'd like to just applaud you for what you're doing on the ethics in Qatar, but Lee, I know what you're doing, and this is something that we have at Emerson all the time, soft power to bridge cultures. You've done some great work with UAE, and you brought the woman in who loves hockey, and that's a wonderful story. On one hand, you know that UAE has many issues that we would probably like to see them improve upon. As we have issues, they would probably like us to. So how do you and Peter strike the balance of raising this, but also continuing to build